Welcome to the Good White Folks Podcast, your trusted source for counter-racism news and analysis. Powered by Planetary Chess and cutting-edge AI, we deliver sharp insights into the state of white supremacy to keep you informed and empowered.
All right, so welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we are diving into some research on AI and racial bias.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're looking at this paper called The Truth Behind the Black GPT, a comparative study of Latimer AI and the Systemic Racism Dismantler by Django Busaja. And this is some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So to set the stage a bit, we've got two AI models that are being compared in this paper.
Right.
Latimer AI, which has been marketed as like the the inclusive solution.
Right.
It's developed by a company called Futuresome, which was founded by John Passmore. And then we have this other model called the Systemic Racism Dismantler, which is a prototype that's built on the work of a lot of scholars in African-centered scholarship.
Right.
So we're talking folks like Dr. Frances Cress Welsing,
Yes.
Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. John Henry Clark.
Yeah. Heavy hitters.
Yeah, heavy hitters. So what's really interesting about this paper is how these two models handle the concept of white fragility.
Right.
That kind of defensiveness that white people often show when discussions of race and racism come up.
That's right. The knee-jerk reaction.
The knee-jerk, like, I'm not racist. Let's just not talk about it.
Right.
And so, Django Busaja, the researcher, put these AI models through a test to see basically how they define racism.
Yeah.
And more importantly, how they deal with the idea of white supremacy.
That's right.
And before we dive into the results, maybe just a quick, what exactly is an LLM?
Oh, yeah.
For folks who might not be familiar.
Yeah. So an LLM, it stands for Large Language Model, which is essentially a pretty complex system that uses AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trained on massive amounts of data.
Yeah.
So we're talking like books, articles, websites, just tons and tons of text data.
Right.
And it can do a lot of things. It can, generate different creative text formats, translate languages, write different kinds of creative content, and answer your questions in a really comprehensive way.
Okay.
Based on all the data it's been trained on.
Right.
So that's basically what an LLM is.
So back to Latimer.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be this, inclusive AI and all that.
Right.
But when it's asked about racism, it gives like a pretty standard definition, focusing on beliefs and individual or institutional bias.
Right.
And, even mentions structural racism.
It does.
Which sounds pretty progressive on the surface.
Yeah, surface level.
But what's interesting is that Latimer really avoids directly connecting racism to white supremacy.
Yeah.
Like, it only brings up the term when it's specifically prompted to.
Right.
So it's almost like tiptoeing around the issue.
Exactly.
Like, afraid to call a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm.
And, for an AI that's claiming to be, rooted in these diverse histories.
Yeah.
And is, like, supposed to be designed for, Black and brown communities.
Right.
That's a pretty major red flag.
It is.
It's like trying to, sanitize the conversation.
Yeah.
Almost like make it more palatable for, white folks.
It really feels that way.
Yeah, it's like, it's pretty messed up, especially considering, they say they're working with HBCUs and stuff.
Right.
It's like they're trying to like sell this like watered down,
right.
Version of racial justice to institutions that have like historically been on the front lines of this fight.
That's right.
So,
yeah, it's a slap in the face.
It's a total slap in the face. And it just shows like how deep this whole, white fragility thing runs.
Yeah.
Like they can't even handle an AI.
Right.
Acknowledging the real root of the problem.
Yeah. They can't handle it.
Because if you acknowledge the problem, then like you might actually have to like, do something about it.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And that's not like part of the plan.
No, not at all.
So, we've got Latimer.
Yeah.
This so-called inclusive AI that's basically skirting around the issue of white supremacy. What about this other model, the Systemic Racism Dismantler?
Right.
Like, how does it approach, the definition of racism?
Well, the dismantler, it doesn't shy away from the truth.
Okay.
It defines racism as this global power structure.
Okay.
That is designed to maintain the dominance of white populations.
Yeah.
And it's drawing, it's pulling from the work of these, African-centered scholars that we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The folks who have, dedicated their lives to understanding and dismantling white supremacy.
Right, right.
So it's not just about individual prejudice or implicit bias or whatever.
Right.
We're talking about a system that's rigged
Right, right.
from the start.
Okay, so the dismantler is very clear.
Yeah.
That white supremacy is like the core of racism.
Right at the heart of it.
Not just some like side issue.
Exactly.
Do you have any like examples, like specific things?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Like, how the dismantler actually talks about this?
One quote that really stood out to me from the dismantler is, "White supremacy is not merely an ideology. It is a system of power that operates globally to ensure the survival and dominance of a specific racial group."
Damn, it's not
Yeah.
it's not pulling any punches.
No punches pull.
Like that's
Right.
that's a far cry from Latimer's
Yeah.
kind of weak ass definition.
Exact. We're
Yeah.
talking like night and day.
Yeah.
The difference between like a Band-Aid and like actual surgery.
Yeah.
Latter's trying to slap a Band-Aid on like a gaping wound.
Right. So, we've got Latimer
Yeah.
with all these promises.
Right.
Deep inclusion, empathetic engagement, bias mitigation, transparency, partnerships with HBCUs.
Yeah. Sounds great.
It sounds good on paper.
On paper.
But when you look at the actual performance,
Yeah.
it's clear that, like, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Right. It really is.
Yeah,
You're
like
right.
they're using this fancy language, all these buzzwords to mask the fact that, like, they're not really addressing the root of the problem.
Yeah, addressing the issue. Yeah.
It's like they're trying to, like, gaslight us
Right.
into thinking that they're on our side while, like, simultaneously, like, perpetuating the very systems
That's right.
that are, like, oppressing us, right?
Exactly. And that's why this research is so important.
Yeah.
It's calling them out
Yeah.
on their bullshit.
This is some
Yeah.
heavy stuff.
Yes, for sure.
We need to unpack this a lot more. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, we were talking about Latimer and this whole dance they're doing around white supremacy.
Right.
And Busaja actually doesn't just call out the problem, but offers some pretty serious solutions.
Yeah, he doesn't just like point fingers. He actually tries to come up with some ways to fix this.
Exactly.
yeah.
And one of the things that that he's really passionate about, being an HBCU grad himself, is that Latimer is being marketed to HBCUs.
Yeah.
And his argument is that HBCUs don't need some, watered down AI.
Right.
They need a system that's really going to tackle the realities that they face head on.
Yeah.
Prepare students to actually fight against systemic racism, not pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's that's a really good point.
And he even quotes Neely Fuller Jr.
Okay.
who was a major figure in the fight against racism.
Yeah. And Fuller said that if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and how it operates, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's real talk, right?
Real talk.
Like you can't solve a problem you don't even understand.
That's right.
And you sure as hell can't solve it with an AI that's like programmed to ignore it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what's interesting is Busaja also looked at how Latimer handles questions about like the psychology of racism.
Okay.
And he found that Latimer consistently uses terms like effects, impacts, consequences, and responses.
So, like, again, tiptoeing around the issue.
Exactly. Because
Okay.
these terms, while, technically correct,
Right.
they focus on the results of racism, not the cause. They
Right.
make it seem like racism is just this random thing that happens
Yeah.
instead of a deliberate system of oppression.
Once again, avoiding, like, the root of the problem.
The root, that's right. And get this. Even when specifically prompted, Latimer avoids mentioning Dr. Frances Cress Welsing.
Hold up, Dr. Welsing.
Yeah.
Like, the brilliant black scholar who, like, dedicated her life to exposing, like, the psychological and social, like, underpinnings
Yes.
of white supremacy.
The one and only
Right.
Latimer, this inclusive AI,
Right.
can't even bring itself to acknowledge one of the most important voices in the fight against racism.
That's beyond messed up.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like they're intentionally trying to erase her contribution.
It feels that way. It really does.
Right.
And that's, that's a classic example of white fragility in action.
Yeah.
They can't handle the truth, so they try to bury it.
Right.
They can't handle it.
It's like, let's talk about racism, but only in a way that makes white people comfortable.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's why what Boussage is calling for is so radical, because he's not just criticizing Latimer, he's actually proposing a concrete solution.
Okay.
He wants Latimer to collaborate with Planetary Chess, the creators of the systemic racism dismantler.
He wants them to work together, like merge their systems.
He believes that, if Latimer were to incorporate the dismantler's framework, then it could actually become a tool for empowerment.
Okay.
A weapon against white supremacy.
I mean, that's a bold move, right? But can you even imagine these two, like, coming together?
It's a long shot.
Yeah.
It's a long shot.
One's all about, like, dodging the truth.
Right.
The other one's all about, like, exposing it.
That's right.
Right.
But he's also calling on investors to support the systemic racism dismantler, even if Latimer doesn't step up.
Right.
He's saying, look, if the so-called inclusive AI won't do the work, let's fund the one that will.
Okay, so he's putting his money where his mouth is.
He's putting his money where his mouth is.
Right. He's not just, like, talking. He's actually, like...
He's taking action.
Taking action.
He understands the urgency of this.
Yep.
He even mentions, the upcoming election and the potential return of Donald Trump,
Okay.
a figure he directly links to white supremacy.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
This is where it gets interesting.
Right. Because, he doesn't mince words.
He doesn't mince words.
He cites Dr. Amos Wilson's work.
Yes.
Specifically, like, his 1990 psychological profile
Yes.
of the white narcissistic racist,
Yes.
which Boussage says perfectly describes Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mhm.
And he even he lists like 22 characteristics
He lists 22.
from that profile, arguing that like they all match Trump's behavior.
All of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Damn, that's some serious shade.
That's shade.
But he's not just like throwing shade. He's
he backs it up.
backing it up.
He backs it up with research.
With research.
He points to, Trump's well-documented connections to far-right figures and groups, his endorsements of violence, his efforts to dismantle, any progress on social justice, and of course his infamous "very fine people" comment.
Yeah, about white supremacists.
About white supremacists.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty damning.
It's pretty damning.
But what does this have to do with AI?
Well, his argument is that this whole, reluctance to label Trump as a white supremacist is itself a manifestation of white fragility on a national scale.
Okay.
It's the same avoidance, the same tiptoeing around the issue that we see with Latimer AI.
So he's connecting the dots.
He's connecting the dots.
Between individual behavior,
Yes.
political rhetoric,
Yes.
and the way we design technology.
The way we design technology.
Right.
He's basically saying that if we can't even have an honest conversation about white supremacy in our society, how can we expect to create an AI that will dismantle it?
That's powerful.
It's a powerful point.
Right. It's like we're building AI in our own image.
In our own image.
With all of our flaws.
With all our flaws.
And blind spots.
And blind spots.
Right.
And that's why Boussage's research is so crucial.
Yeah.
He's forcing us to confront our own biases,
right.
Not just the ones that are embedded in our algorithms. He's saying we need to get our own house in order before we can expect AI to do the same.
This is
deep stuff.
This is some deep stuff.
Deep stuff.
Man. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are just scratching the surface.
Okay, so we're back, and man, this research is it's really got me thinking,
Yeah.
Like we've been talking about how Latimer AI, kind of dances around white supremacy.
Right.
And how Boussage was calling for like a whole reframing of how we even approach racism in AI.
Yeah.
But like, what does that actually look like in practice?
Right. That's the question.
Like, how do we build AI that's not just inclusive, like in name only?
Right.
But actually helps dismantle these systems of oppression.
Yeah. How do we get to the real deal?
The real deal, right.
Exactly.
So Boussage, he actually gives this this pretty interesting example.
Okay.
Using Google's Gemini model.
Right.
And he basically asks Gemini to analyze his own arguments.
Oh, wow.
About redefining racism as white supremacy.
Okay, so he's using AI to, like, critique his critique of another AI.
Yeah, it's like AI Inception or something, but like with a really serious point.
Right.
And what's wild is that Gemini, when it's like prompted in the right way,
Yeah.
it actually shows that like AI can grasp these really complex ideas.
So it's possible.
It's possible, yeah.
Okay.
So what happened?
Yeah, what did Gemini say?
Like, what did Gemini actually say?
So Gemini basically explains that, unlike us flawed humans, AI can quickly process tons of information that might have been hidden or hard to find in the past.
Right.
Imagine like a black student back in the 70s trying to challenge the mainstream narrative about race. Back then, finding the resources to like debunk racist bullshit was a whole lot harder.
Right.
But with AI, that information is like right there at your fingertips.
So it's almost like AI could be a tool
Right.
for like leveling the playing field a bit, giving like everybody access to the knowledge.
That's right.
They need to like fight back.
Yeah.
Against oppression.
Gemini even talks about like how certain Bible verses were used to justify slavery and oppression.
Right.
But now with AI, you can easily find alternative interpretations in historical context.
Okay.
It even quotes Dr. Amos Wilson, defining racism as a tool for maintaining power, which,
Right.
spot on.
Right. Okay, that gives me some hope. It sounds like, AI could be a really powerful weapon against like the lies and the propaganda that have been used to uphold white supremacy, like for so long,
For centuries.
Yeah, for centuries.
But, and there's always a but.
Right.
Busaja points out that even in this like really insightful analysis, Gemini sees a form of white fragility.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was like nailing the whole like, racism as white supremacy thing.
It was. But check this out. Gemini acknowledges racism's role in creating racial hierarchies, but it uses the plural hierarchies.
Okay.
Implying that there are like multiple systems of racial dominance at play.
So it's like trying to soften the blow a bit.
Exactly.
Make it seem less like confrontational.
Right.
By implying that like white supremacy isn't the only game in town.
Exactly. And Busaja pushes back hard on this. He emphasizes that there's only one dominant racial hierarchy, and it's white supremacy.
So even when AI seems to be like getting it right, there can still be these like kind of sneaky linguistic choices,
Right.
that reveal this like deeper discomfort with confronting the truth head on.
It's ingrained.
It's ingrained.
And that brings us back to Busaja's main point.
Yeah.
If we want AI that's truly anti-racist, we can't shy away from the uncomfortable truths. We have to call out white supremacy by name, not dance around it with euphemisms and vague language.
Right.
It's not about being colorblind or not seeing race.
It's about seeing it.
It's about seeing it and naming it.
So it sounds like creating anti-racist AI isn't just about like tweaking algorithms.
Right.
It's about like a fundamental shift
Mm-hmm.
in how we think and talk about racism itself.
Absolutely. It's about being honest about the way power operates in our society and challenging the narratives that uphold white supremacy.
So where do we go from here? Like, what's the takeaway for our listeners?
Busaja ends his paper with a really powerful call to action. He urges us to not just read his research, but to think deeply about what it means for the future. He asks, if AI is going to shape our world, how can we make sure it's truly anti-racist and doesn't just continue the same systems of oppression?
Damn. That's a question we all need to be wrestling with, right?
It's not just about AI. It's about the kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah. And, like Busaja reminds us, this isn't just some abstract, philosophical debate.
Well,
This is like, this shit has real world consequences,
real world consequences.
Especially for Black and brown communities
Absolutely.
who are like on the front lines of this fight.
On the front lines.
So what can we do? Like, how can we ensure that AI is used for good? That it becomes a tool for dismantling white supremacy and not just another weapon in its arsenal.
It starts with awareness. We need to educate ourselves about these issues, talk about them with our friends and family, and hold the companies creating this technology accountable. We can't just sit back and hope for the best.
Right.
We have to actively shape the development of AI and make sure it aligns with our values.
We can't let the same people who like created and benefited from these systems of oppression be the ones who control the future of AI.
Absolutely not. You need to demand more, fight harder, And never stop pushing for a world where technology serves the liberation of all people, not just a select few.
Well said. And to our listeners, if you want to dive deeper into this, we highly recommend checking out Janga Busaj's full research paper.
Yeah, it's a must-read.
We'll link to it in the show notes. This has been, a heavy conversation.
Heavy but necessary.
But really necessary.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep fighting the good fight. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Good White Folks podcast. Be sure to visit us at planetarychess.org to explore more content and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. For those who want to stay ahead, join our paid tier for just $10 a month and receive daily state of white supremacy alerts, Monday through Friday. Stay informed, stay empowered, and let's dismantle together.